A warm evening in 2002 was meant to be special for the young couple, Justin and April Barber. They were celebrating their third wedding anniversary with a romantic dinner at a restaurant, which later turned into a walk along Jacksonville Beach, Florida. Nothing suggested any trouble in this magical moment. Having left their shoes on the sand near the boardwalk, the lovers slowly strolled along the shoreline. Moonlight illuminated their path, and waves gently washed over their bare feet. It seemed the whole world belonged to just the two of them until April suddenly felt uneasy. A figure of an unknown person was approaching them from the darkness. His confident stride and determined intentions instantly disturbed the romantic atmosphere of the evening. In a moment, the situation turned tragic. Shots rang out. The unknown assailant fatally wounded 27-year-old April by shooting her in the face and hit her husband several times as well. Later, Justin, who was bleeding profusely, was discovered by a passing motorist in his car on the coastal highway. Seeing the victim's grave condition, the witness immediately called emergency services. The 30-year-old man, whose condition was deteriorating due to blood loss, was urgently airlifted to a Jacksonville hospital. Police began searching for April, which took some time due to the uncertain location of the crime. Eventually, her body was found near the wooden boardwalk. The young woman was lying curled up, her once beautiful face mutilated by a bullet that had passed through her cheek. Justin's medical examination revealed 4 gunshot wounds, a through-and-through wound in his left shoulder, an angled bullet wound in his right shoulder, a grazing wound across his chest, and a shot through the center of his left palm from the back. Despite multiple injuries, they proved to be non-serious, and the man was discharged from the hospital the next day. Experienced officers, for whom nighttime attacks were routine matters, noted the atypical nature of this crime, even though it involved firearms. A week after the tragedy, having recovered from shock, Justin returned to the crime scene with investigators to reconstruct the events of that fatal evening. According to him, the unknown assailant attempted to rob them before opening fire. They were confused, but there was nowhere to run from him. At a distance of about 10 meters, the stranger raised his hand holding a gun. He appeared threatening. The couple stopped, after which the stranger, threatening them with the gun, demanded cash. The couple hesitated. While they were thinking about what to do, a shot rang out, aimed at April. Justin lunged at the attacker to take away the weapon. He doesn't remember exactly what happened during the struggle, but as a result, he received several gunshot wounds to different parts of his body. At some point, he lost consciousness, and when he came to, he couldn't find his wife. In a state of shock, he ran back and forth on the beach, calling for April, but couldn't locate her on the sand. But soon the husband noticed his wife's body bobbing in the waves face down. Please subscribe to my channel, and I'll bring you more videos featuring the most shocking and true crime stories. Justin, without thinking, rushed into the water, trying to pull his beloved out of the water, which was difficult for him since he was in shock and didn't yet realize he had several gunshot wounds. The man pulled April onto the shore, then dragged her about 100 meters up the beach. After this, even in his shocked state, he felt something was wrong with his body. Every movement caused terrible pain, especially in the shoulder area. It was also difficult to move his hands. With his wife, he made it to the base of the wooden boardwalk where there were railings. Leaning on them, he lifted and propped up her legs, after which she fell. He didn't have the strength to lift the body again. At that moment, Justin examined himself and noticed the wounds and blood. So he decided to leave her there and go for help. He tried to flag down a car, but wasn't successful. Then he got behind the wheel and drove to get help himself. After driving several kilometers, he felt his strength failing. Then the young man stopped on the road and got out of the car. A driver in an oncoming vehicle saw the wounded man and called 911. Justin appeared very distraught. He barely held back tears while telling about this tragedy. For several days, police combed the beach, trying to find any evidence. They hoped to get something, at least clear footprints or shoe prints of the attacker. Ideally, the gun used in the attack. Police used metal detectors but couldn't find anything. However, Justin couldn't describe the criminal who attacked them. In the darkness of night, he didn't make out his face or any distinguishing features. It was impossible to use this information for searches. All the victim could describe was that the man was slightly taller than himself and weighed a bit more. He was wearing a baggy shirt and a baseball cap. However, the victim noted that he was very tanned but had pale hands. Therefore, detectives couldn't create a suspect sketch. After careful analysis, police concluded that the description could match about 800,000 people living in the nearest city and its surroundings. This scant information required verification, which took a long 4 years until everything was obtained to form a criminal case. Officers tried to understand why the robber killed the girl without any reason, while only wounding the husband, despite the fact that he had lost consciousness and was an easy target. The investigators were puzzled by numerous inconsistencies in this case. A typical robber usually grabs the money and runs, avoiding the use of weapons to not draw unnecessary attention. But in this case, the perpetrator didn't take anything, neither the cash from April's purse nor the valuables, which included expensive watches, necklaces, and a diamond ring. The most troubling question was, why kill the girl if no one had seen the attacker's face anyway? Due to the lack of physical evidence, detectives decided to dig deeper into the couple's life. Their search led them to Oklahoma, where both victims were from. April grew up in the tiny town of Hennessy, with a population of only 2,000 souls. She was a bright personality who always supported her husband during difficult moments in their married life. Justin also came from a small town located a few hours' drive from Hennessy. His family owned a 50-hectare farm. In his youth, he worked with his older brother at a local grocery store, helping his parents maintain the household. Both came from strong, loving families where an atmosphere of mutual support and understanding prevailed. They had many brothers and sisters, and relatives often gathered together, maintaining close family ties. Justin stood out from childhood for his sensible nature and calm demeanor. He was a devoted parishioner of the local church, excelled in school, and later attended the University of Oklahoma. After receiving his education in finance, he began working as a financial analyst. However, this work didn't bring him satisfaction, and the ambitious young man returned to university to pursue a degree in business and management. Justin was deeply committed to Christian values and considered family the most important part of his life. Fate brought them together in 1998 through a mutual friend. April was striking in her beauty and zest for life. Bright and self-confident, she participated in beauty pageants, always dressed elegantly, and took particularly meticulous care of her hair. At the same time, she remained a simple and sincere girl, which gave her a special charm. Her childhood was happy. She adored her father, who was a hunter, and enjoyed tasting his hunting trophies. But in 1993, the family idyll was shattered. April's mother died from cancer. The 18-year-old girl had to take on all household duties, as her father was often away on business trips trying to provide for the family. Later, he began to abuse alcohol, and the care of her younger brother and sister fell entirely on April's shoulders, who combined studies with household chores. The loss of her mother determined her future life path. April decided to study radiation therapy, aspiring to help cancer patients. It was at university where the paths of 26-year-old Justin and 23-year-old April crossed. At that time, he was the best student in the MBA program and was popular among his classmates. Later, Justin recalled how he was instantly charmed by this girl whose smile seemed to illuminate everything around her. Behind April's radiant smile lay an elusive sadness over the loss of her mother, a topic she tried to avoid. It was this combination of joy and sadness that made her image so genuine and unforgettable. She also quickly fell in love with the stately, successful Justin, who captured her heart. Their relationship developed rapidly. When Justin brought April to meet his parents, they immediately loved this friendly, sociable beauty. Justin was particularly attracted to her serious attitude toward family values. They seemed made for each other, young, sociable, passionate about shared interests. In August 1999, just 10 months after meeting, the couple celebrated their wedding in the Bahamas. A week of honeymoon on the Paradise Coast became the beginning of their married life, which promised to be long and happy. Returning home, Justin continued his career in finance, while April fulfilled her dream by working with cancer patients in the hospital. However, their love story tragically ended after 3 years, on that same seashore, where a single shot to the face ended the young woman's life. Delving deeper into the investigation, police discovered that the idyllic picture of family happiness that Justin painted differed substantially from reality. Although at the sheriff's office he spoke of boundless love for his beautiful wife, testimonies from close ones revealed a different story. Problems began just a month after the wedding when April took in her younger brother and sister. The couple couldn't agree on raising the children, which led to constant conflicts. By the end of 2000, the situation had become so acute that the children were forced to move in with other relatives. It seemed that now the newlyweds could enjoy life together, but fate had other plans. Justin received an attractive job offer in Florida and, without hesitation, moved to Jacksonville. April supported her husband's ambitions but stayed in her hometown. She was held back both by her responsibility to patients and the inability to leave her younger brother and sister, whom she continued to look after. 3 hours by car separated the couple. At first, they tried to maintain closeness, meeting on weekends, talking on the phone daily. But gradually, the distance took its toll, communication became increasingly rare. In early August 2002, April shared with her best friend her suspicions about her husband's infidelity. She had learned about a girl from the car rental agency with whom Justin regularly played tennis and spent a lot of time. The concerned wife directly asked her husband about the possible affair. Justin firmly denied any accusations of infidelity, but April didn't believe his words. On their third wedding anniversary, August 4, she informed her husband of her decision to divorce. They agreed to meet on August 16, 2002, to discuss everything. The next day, April was dead. These new circumstances prompted investigators to call Justin in for another interrogation. He continued to deny any extramarital affairs, persistently creating an image of a perfect family man. However, he didn't know that in the adjacent room, his mistress had already confessed to investigators about their affair. Only when confronted with evidence did Justin finally admit his infidelity. This moment became a turning point in the investigation. Detectives realized how skillfully the suspect could lie. The investigation focused on Justin Barber, and soon a possible motive for murder emerged. During a search of his apartment, they found April's life insurance policy worth $2 million, with Justin listed as the sole beneficiary. Reviewing the beach footage, investigators noticed the unnaturalness of his emotions. He covered his eyes with his hands and sobbed, but there were no real tears. Now that the initial attention to the crime scene had passed, this detail seemed particularly suspicious. Other questions arose. Why didn't he call for help immediately after reaching the car? Why did he drive so far, passing numerous stores and gas stations where he could have asked for help? Despite all suspicions, Justin proved to be a difficult suspect. He continued to cooperate with the investigation, insisting on his version of events, though no one believed him anymore. No evidence was found of another person's presence on the beach that night. Except for one unconfirmed testimony about another car, no one could corroborate his story. The absence of surveillance cameras on the beach complicated the investigation. The fact that the perpetrator left no traces, and his behavior starkly differed from that of a typical robber, only intensified suspicions about Justin. The motive to get rid of his tiresome wife and receive insurance payments seemed increasingly likely. Over the next 2 years, the investigation failed to gather enough evidence to bring formal charges. Meanwhile, Justin moved to Portland, Oregon, got a new job, and began a relationship with a girl named Lisa. He seemed to have completely forgotten about his former wife and was enjoying his new life. However, investigators didn't give up. They initiated another search of his house, this time focusing on examining his computer. This decision proved crucial to the investigation. Investigators managed to obtain decisive evidence of the suspect's involvement in the crime after careful analysis of his computer. The discovered correspondence and search history clearly indicated that the murder was planned in advance and with particular attention to detail. The collected materials became the missing elements that allowed the prosecution to form a complete picture of the crime and bring charges. On July 9, 2004, Justin Barber was officially charged with first-degree murder of his wife, April Barber. According to Florida state law, where the crime was committed, such an offense carried the most severe punishment, the death penalty. The investigation established that the husband deliberately took his wife's life by making a precise shot to her face. Afterward, attempting to stage an attack, he shot himself 4 times, though the nature of the wounds revealed their superficial character. The court session gathered numerous representatives from both sides, both the defendant's relatives and the victim's close ones. The atmosphere in the courtroom was permeated with grief. All present remembered April as an exceptionally bright and kind person. Even the defendant's mother, despite her sorrow over losing her beloved daughter-in-law, couldn't believe her son was capable of such a horrible act. The prosecution presented Justin not only as a murderer but also as a calculating fraudster. According to the prosecution's version, he sought not just to end the marriage that had become a burden but to gain maximum financial benefit from it, an insurance payout of $2 million for his wife's life. Justin's mistress, whom he met on the tennis court, testified in court. She spoke about their relationship, which began shortly before the murder and quickly developed into an intimate connection. However, as it turned out during the hearings, she wasn't the only one. The prosecution established at least 5 women with whom the defendant maintained secret love affairs during the marriage. Justin carefully concealed his infidelities, but April sensed his emotional detachment in the last months of their life together. Eventually, she learned about his affair with the tennis player. The prosecution argued that instead of a normal divorce, the defendant chose a more profitable path for himself. 11 months before the tragedy, he took out 2 insurance policies on himself and his wife totaling $2 million, where each spouse was the beneficiary of the other. At that time, Justin was already having extramarital affairs, suggesting a premeditated murder. The defendant's financial situation also played an important role. Shortly before the tragedy, he had made several unsuccessful deals, resulting in a debt of $58,000. According to the investigation, it was this difficult financial situation that pushed him to carry out his criminal plan. The examination of the defendant's computer provided substantial evidence of his intentions. 6 months before the murder, he searched the internet for information about the lethality of wounds to various body parts, particularly the chest and head. The prosecution believed he was carefully studying how to most effectively take his wife's life with the first shot and how to inflict non-lethal wounds on himself to deflect suspicion. Even the nature of Justin's own wounds raised doubts with investigators. Particular attention was drawn to his chest wound, whose trajectory strangely coincided with the trajectory of the bullet that ended April's life. Such a number of coincidences seemed to the prosecution to be non-accidental. At the court hearing, the prosecutor presented key evidence that allowed them to reconstruct the sequence of events of that tragic night. The investigation revealed that the romantic beach walk was actually a cover for attempted murder. The first attempt to take his wife's life was drowning. This was evidenced by the characteristic foam around her mouth, a typical sign that someone had choked on salt water. After April lost consciousness from drowning, Justin dragged her to the location where the body was later found. There, he made the fatal shot, which became one of the key pieces of evidence in the case. Investigators paid special attention to the pattern of blood drops flowing down the victim's face. This evidence contradicted Justin's version about dragging his wife's body about 100 meters. In such a case, the blood stain pattern would have changed due to numerous movements of the body. The defense, however, insisted on the defendant's innocence. The lawyers accused detectives of destroying important evidence on the beach and emphasized the lack of direct evidence, including the murder weapon. The gun was never found. They claimed that law enforcement was simply trying to close the case as quickly as possible by appointing a culprit. The defense paid particular attention to ignored important testimony. A married couple had seen a Chrysler pickup truck near the victim's car, but police didn't investigate this vehicle. The lawyers also insisted that all prosecution evidence was circumstantial. They explained the insurance policy as a common practice among married couples, emphasizing that it was taken out almost a year before the tragedy on both spouses with April's consent. Regarding the financial motive, the defense pointed to Justin's high annual income, over $100,000, which made his $58,000 debt quite manageable. The lawyers also questioned the internet searches as evidence, arguing they were selectively chosen from thousands of innocent searches. The prosecution's version, according to the defense, had logical contradictions. They pointed out the irrationality of the actions: why first drown the victim and then shoot, leaving additional evidence? Why not stage the robbery more convincingly by disposing of the valuables? In their opinion, someone with Justin's intelligence could have planned the crime much more carefully. Defense experts also refuted the self-inflicted shooting version. They drew attention to the dangerous proximity of the wounds to vital organs and a major artery. Important evidence came from bullet holes in the clothing that didn't match the position of wounds on the body, which could indicate a struggle for the weapon. The jury deliberated for 4 days, spending about 30 hours discussing the case materials. Opinions were divided: 2 believed the defendant was innocent, 9 voted for a guilty verdict, and the rest couldn't decide. Eventually, Justin Barber was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Despite the verdict, he continued to maintain his innocence and filed appeals, which were rejected. I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to the channel. Until next time, friends.